everyone, Stephanie Denman here from the Denman Homestead. And today I posted a couple snippets on my social media pages about something I tried. I wanted to use the sourdough discard to try to make some bagels. And I tried out a new recipe that I've never tried before. And I put a little bit of my own spin on some of them. So I kind of made it my own in a way. But it really turned out really well. And let me show you how they look. So I made just a regular plain bagel and really good. I'm a plain bagel lover. Like, I'm good with just cream cheese and a plain bagel. But sometimes when I'm feeling fancy, I made an everything, like I had the everything seasoning bagel, like everything seasoning, so I could like put it on toast or whatever. So I had that seasoning already, and I went ahead and made my everything bagel seasoning bagel. So, and that one turned out really nice. And then, I don't know if you know of what Panera bread is, Panera bread, or if you have one near you. We have a Panera bread, and I absolutely love their cinnamon sugar, I think it's just called like a cinnamon sugar crunch bagel, but it had this like crunchy cinnamon sugar topping on the bagel, and it's like a sweet bagel. So I went ahead and made my own version of that, and it turned out great as well. It's even got that crunchy top on it too. So I'm gonna show you how I made these bagels, and it's almost 6 o'clock at night, and we're gonna get these done like before everyone's ready for bed. That's how quick this recipe is. There is about a 45-minute to an hour rise time for the dough, but after that, it takes about 30 minutes to cook them. So give or take, this recipe probably takes a little under 2 hours from start to finish. So I'll show you how we get that going right now. Okay, I have my stand mixer over here ready with the dough hook on, and I'm gonna tell you all the ingredients step by step. So we're gonna start with 2 cups of warm water to our bowl. Then we're gonna use half a cup of our sourdough starter discard. So I have my actual sourdough starter over here. Got Megan, my sourdough starter over here. So she's nice and bubbly because I fed her. I discarded and I fed her. So this was the discard from earlier. And so I'm using this to cook my bagels with. So I'm gonna use half a cup of the sourdough discard. Now this is not gonna be my only yeast though. So just keep that in mind. You are gonna need some commercial dry yeast for this recipe as well. This sourdough discard is really gonna give it a lot of good flavor. But it's not gonna actually be able to allow it enough time to develop, because this is such a quick recipe that you are gonna need actual like yeast, the commercial yeast to make this recipe work. So we're gonna add this half cup starter, half a cup of the discard, of the sourdough discard, to the warm water. Okay, and then I've got this rapid rise instant yeast. So I'm gonna use this yeast for this recipe, and I'm gonna do 3.5 teaspoons of this instant yeast. And so normally when you're working with sourdough starter, active sourdough starter, not the discard, which is inactive starter, you allow that wild yeast to rise and develop over the course of hours. So with this recipe, we're using the help of some rapid rise yeast in addition to our sourdough discard. So really that discard is just gonna give it a little bit of extra flavor. It does add in some yeast to it, but this rapid rise yeast is what we really need to get those bagels nice and fluffy. All right, so we've got our 3.5 teaspoons of our yeast. Now we're gonna add in 2 tablespoons of white sugar. I've just got this organic cane sugar, but it's pretty much the same stuff. Granulated sugar. 1, 2. Okay. Now you just need 2½ teaspoons of kosher salt. I've got my pink Himalayan sea salt. I use that instead. So you can use either one of them. And I'm just gonna crank away in here until I feel comfortable about 2½ teaspoons. I'm gonna eyeball it. Okay, this next part, you're gonna need 6 cups of unbleached bread flour. So I've got King Arthur's organic bread flour that I use. And I'm gonna add in 5½ cups at first, and then I'm gonna add in the last ½ cup slowly. I just wanna make sure that my dough isn't overly dry or overly wet. So you may have to manipulate your dough. You want a very dense, non-sticky dough, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. So I've added my 5½ cups of flour in here, and now I'm going to turn my mixer on.
Wicked. Remix.
While this is combining, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my area. Okay, so the dough I have not added the other ½ cup yet, but you can just see right here the texture of the dough. Get you over here. It is it's a little sticky, so we will just go ahead and add in a little bit at a time just to get it not as sticky. We want it a pretty firm ball. And pay attention to your machine, because if your stand mixer sounds like it's really struggling, then give it a few breaks, because this is kind of hard on your machine sometimes if you don't have a commercial machine. I actually like the way that this dough consistency is right now, and I only did 5 3/4 cups of flour, so I didn't do the full 6 cups. It's already got that real dense, non-sticky consistency as it is. So I'm going to just let this dough knead in the bowl for about 13 minutes. So that's gonna sit there for 13 minutes doing this. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've scraped the dough down, and now I'm just going to take this dough and put it into a large bowl, and we're gonna let this sit for about 45 minutes to an hour, and where it's going to double in size. And then once it doubles in size, I'll show you what we do next. Oh, and pretty important, just make sure that you put this in kind of like a warmer spot in your house. So maybe like on top of your oven or right inside your oven, or keep your oven cracked if you just cooked something. Or if you haven't cooked anything at all, you could just put this inside your oven with your oven light on. That would give enough heat just to keep the environment warm and draft free. Okay, let this rest for a little bit over an hour because we went up to Daniel and Lou's and had dinner. So I came back and look at that. Look how much this has risen in the bowl. Like, it's to the top of the saran wrap. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to punch this down. Like, it's just called punching it down, but you basically deflate it with your fist. You just like put your fist in it and it deflates the rise. And then I'm going to turn it out onto a floured surface, and I'm gonna cut it into 8 equal parts. You can cut this into 12 if you want them smaller, but I'm gonna do 8. And then while we're dividing and shaping our dough, what I'm gonna have going on in the oven is I'm gonna preheat my oven to 400 degrees, and then I'm gonna get some water boiling in my pot. So right here is my pot of water, and in this water I want like a soft rolling boil. I don't want it super hard, but I just want it like a nice rolling boil. But to the water, I'm going to add in 3 tablespoons of sugar, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of salt to my water. This is gonna help us basically blanch our bagels. So it's going to help, and it's not gonna make them soggy. I know it sounds a little weird, but in order to make a traditional bagel, you need to put them in the water for about 30 seconds each side, 30 seconds to a minute on each side. What that does is it helps the bagel to create almost like a gel or a glaze on the outside of the bagel, and then the inside is really nice and chewy and soft, but the outside has that chewy, hard texture that a bagel normally has. So that's the whole purpose of dunking your bagel dough in the boiling water. So let me go ahead and do that now. I'll add the ingredients to the water, and then we'll go ahead and start shaping the dough. So we've got our bagel dough here, and sticking to the top a little bit. I'm just gonna punch this down a little bit, like that, okay? And I'm going to take just a little bit of flour. This is a clean surface. I just cleaned up, so lightly flour. Now I have 2 pans set aside here so that when we start to shape our dough, I'm going to set them here on my pan. When we shape our bagels, I'll just set them right there on the pan. Okay, so I'm going to take my dough here. Just going to basically take my hands and pull it apart from the pan here. You can see very well. Sink. All right. Just gonna give it a little bit, a couple turns on this floured surface so it's a little easier to work with. It's not so sticky. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this into 8 equal parts. You can use whatever tool you have. A butcher's knife would probably work. I have this dough cutter here. So I'm just going to start down the middle. Basically eyeball what half looks like to me. Cut that in half. And then we're going to cut one side in half again. The other side in half. Okay? And then these little sections, we're going to cut this in half again. Yes.
Do you wonder if I'm like me and Dad are watching football out there?
Oh, nice. I'll be out there in a minute. because they're watching football outside. They're so cute. All right, so I've got they're not perfectly equal, but we've got 8 sections here. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can go about shaping your bagel. One way is to basically roll it out like a noodle almost. And it's personal preference, whichever way you like to do it, to shape them. But you can just basically roll out the dough into, something like this, and then connect the ends together to create, and just kind of mash that in together to create your bagel shape, right? That's one way to do it. And then once you've got the shape that you like, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit. You're gonna take that and just set it down on your sheet. We are gonna want this to rise for another about 10 minutes or so, and it does that naturally as you're working the dough. Another way you can do this is that you can just basically knead your dough a little bit into kind of a ball, a dough ball. And then what you're going to want to do is you have your, almost like a biscuit, right? Like a flat, like a disc. And you just basically poke a hole with your finger through it. And then what I kind of like to do is I just spin it on my finger, and it kind of stretches the bagel out from the inside. You don't have to worry about mashing 2 ends together necessarily. But you just kind of manipulate it until you get that bagel shape, okay? See? So that's what we're working with. I kind of tend to like this one better, just because I feel like I don't have a seam that I have to worry about pushing together so much, but to each his own. We're going to, for just if you want to add anything into the dough, now would be the time to do it. So, for example, cinnamon sugar, I'm going to go ahead and add that cinnamon sugar to the dough as I'm kneading it, and then rolling it out. If you're just topping your bagel, then you'll do all the toppings after we blanch them in the water. But if you want to do like a jalapeno cheddar, or anything else that you want inside the dough, to bake inside the dough, now would be the time to kind of knead that in there. And I'll show you how I do that when I do the cinnamon and sugar. And as you're working the dough, if it becomes too sticky, just dust it with a little bit of that flour that you have on your work surface. So, and just keep in mind, you're gonna want this hole to be a little bit bigger than what you think that you need it to be, because when you start to blanch it in the water, everything kind of tends to swell and shrink. Oh, my oven's been preheated. So if your hole's a little bit bigger than normal, that's okay, because even as they're sitting here to rise, they're getting a little bit, the holes are getting a little small. So keep that in mind. Okay, for the cinnamon sugar one, let me show you what I do. I have my little shaker. It already has a mixture of like our cinnamon sugar mixture that I put on like my kids' toast and stuff. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit of the cinnamon sugar mixture in my dough, just right on top of a flat piece of dough. And then I'm going to, when I have like a nice layer, I'm going to fold it on top of itself like that. And then I'm gonna do that on this side too. And I just did it twice. If you want to do it a third time, go for it. It just kind of depends on how potent you want that flavor to come through your bagel. So I did 2 times, and then I'm just going to kind of fold it on top of each itself a couple more times just to kind of get it good and mixed in there. I'm just kneading it into like a disc shape now so that I can poke a hole and spin it. Water is starting to come to a boil over there too, so it's perfect timing. So let's bring these trays back over to the stove. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our bagels, and I can fit about 3 bagels at a time in my pot, but I'm gonna take them and I'm going to put them top side down into the water. And then I'm gonna count to maybe to 30 seconds per side, 30 seconds to a minute per side. And then we're gonna flip them and do the same thing on the other side. And they just float. See how they float there? And I have a slotted spoon, and I'm just going to use this to flip them here in a second. Then from here, we're just going to give them a little bit of a tap and set them straight back down onto our baking sheet. I have this lined with a Silpat mat. The other one I have is parchment paper. Just make sure that you have either one of those because these will stick straight to your pan if you don't have some sort of parchment paper or Silpat for them to bake on. Now is the time to add any toppings that you want it to bake into the bagel, like on top. So for these, I'm gonna sprinkle on this everything bagel seasoning. It's called like everything but the bagel, or this is called everything bagel seasoning. I'm gonna sprinkle these on 3 of these over here. And these, I'm just gonna let them be plain bagels. So I'm gonna show you what they look like, and they don't look too appetizing like this, right? Kinda look a little squishy, and that's okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my last 2 in the water. This is my cinnamon sugar one here. A word of advice, if you're gonna do cinnamon sugar along with your other bagels, I would save your cinnamon sugar bagels till the end, because sometimes the cinnamon and the sugar inside the bagel can kind of leach a little bit into the water as it's boiling. So depending on if you want some of those flavors to transfer to your other bagels, you may want to just hold those for last. Like, get your plain ones out of the way, ones that you're just going to put some toppings on and not the, you know, the stuff that's already inside the bagel. While these are finishing up, I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the oven, and these will follow in shortly. I'm going to put those on the top rack for 15 minutes. And take these out. Now I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some extra cinnamon sugar on top of this one. And then just for a little added extra something on top, we're going to add in a little bit of brown sugar. I just have this little 1/8 scooper here, and I'm not even really going to fill it up to the top. I just use it to scoop. And I just kind of scoop it around the inside edges. Some of it will fall inside, and that's okay too. But it's just going to give it like a nice little crust on the outside. Now we're going to pop this in the oven in the middle rack. So we are about a minute behind the first one, so just keep that in mind that the bottom rack may need just an extra minute or so. But here's what we're gonna do. When this 15 minutes beeps, we're gonna take the top rack and switch it with the one on the bottom. So we're gonna switch them and then cook them for an additional 10 minutes and just look at them. And if they don't have that golden brown exterior, bake them for another 5 minutes. But for me in my oven, every oven's a little bit different. 15 minutes to start, switch them from the top to the middle rack, like alternate the racks, and then another 10 minutes and they should be good to go. So we'll check them in 15 minutes and we'll go from there. Okay, my oven just beeped at 15 minutes, so let's take them out and swap them. Whew. These are huge, look at them. You definitely could make smaller bagels. These are not your average store-bought bagel. So here's the top rack. Here's our bottom rack. Now we're gonna put this on top. This one on the bottom. More minutes and then they should be done. Okay, the oven just beeped, so I'm going to take them out. Look, guys. Look at those. They look good. All right, let's go take them to cool off. Okay guys, check it out. We got our brown sugar and cinnamon crunch bagel. We got our plain bagels here. And they look really good. These are huge. And then we got that everything but the bagel seasoning bagels. And they look great, I think. So you might be tempted to get in on these bagels, right? They are very hot, they're very fresh, but let them cool. Like if you can, at least for maybe like 10-15 minutes, because they are still cooking in the center. If you cut them open right away, they may still be a little doughy. But for example, when we made the other batch of bagels, we let them sit for maybe like 10 minutes or so. Perfectly done. No undercookedness in the center. And they may be perfectly done now, but just to be on the safe side, I would give them a little bit of time to cool off. And if you're from like New York or whatever, you can do that knock test. When I was researching bagels, I was fascinated by the knock test, which you'll have to look it up, but apparently it's like a thing that they do to test the awesomeness of the bagel. It's supposed to be super hard, almost like a crunch on the outside, and you open it up and it's super fluffy and just awesome on the inside. So these turned out great, and they were very easy, less than 2 hours from start to finish. I even am going to make it to Monday Night Football. It's halftime now, so I'm gonna go join the family and here in a second and watch the second half of Monday Night Football. But these were super easy to make, and just using your sourdough starter discard. I'm sure there's other ways to make bagels without having sourdough starter, so we'll have to experiment with some of those. But I don't know that they're gonna beat these, because guys, these are like nothing that you'll find in the store. Now you are supposed to let them sit to let them continue to cool and come together so that they're not so doughy in the middle. We've had these out of the oven for what, like 5 minutes now, but I really have not tried. I've tried an everything but the bagel seasoning one, and I tried a plain part of the plain bagel earlier with my last batch, but I have not tried the brown cinnamon and sugar bagel. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and try that one. I'm gonna go ahead and cut one open and try it. So yeah, I wanna do this warm one. So I'm gonna cut this one open with you guys on the camera so you can see what it looks like in the center and on the outside and all the goodness. So 1 second. Okay, we got our bagel and it looks good. Actually, let's go ahead and cut it this way. So you see some of that cinnamon and sugar swirls on the inside of the bagel there. But this is my favorite part, like the top of the bagel. Let's do this. Ready? I didn't put very much. I probably could have added a little bit more cinnamon and sugar, like in the dough, but it's very lightly, it's coming through like super light. The top has more of the sweet because the top is where it had that brown sugar on top, but the inside just had like a sprinkle and then a fold over and a sprinkle. So it wasn't too much, but you're definitely getting a lot, that cinnamon sugar flavor, just it's not very sweet. And the inside of the bread, let me see if I can get a better angle so you can see. The inside of the bread is not doughy at all. It's just light and fluffy, like pillowy. and the outside definitely has that crisp, like bagel texture that you like. So honestly, this is a win in my book. So try them. Try them. Just try them. I promise you, they're not hard to do. And I'm gonna finish this warm bagel outside, watching football with the family, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.